to show you some of the ways I've been using this. Now, what I discovered when I started playing around on the OpenAI website, they have a kind of an area there which is called Playground, where you can test out different ideas. And one of the things I found that was really interesting is that actually GPT-3 producing content, generating content, for me, wasn't its strongest point. I found it actually was far more capable at doing things like classifying information, transforming information from one form to another, translating data. So if you type in some English and you want it in code, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of the areas where I really started focusing on. So let me just kind of show you some practical use cases. So if you're involved in SEO at all, one of the things that you probably have to do quite a lot is a process called keyword research. So you're using a tool. This particular tool is Ahrefs, but it would equally apply to Moz or SEMrush or any of these tools. And so I was doing some keyword research for a law firm, a criminal law firm, and they wanted to do a whole load of content around various criminal conspiracy charges. So you got a whole range of different conspiracy offenses: conspiracy to defraud, conspiracy to distribute Class A drugs, all these kind of different things. Now, because we wanted to be thorough, we went to Ahrefs, we put in the word conspiracy, and we asked it to show us all the keywords that include that term. Now, the problem you have, and this is not just true of, you know, this one example, this is true very often when you're doing keyword research, is that you then got to kind of sort the wheat from the chaff, because you're going to get thousands and thousands of keywords. I mean, here we've got like 26,229 keywords, but very few of them have any direct relevance to criminal conspiracy offenses. We've got things like 9/11 conspiracy, Diana death conspiracy, all kinds of things that just don't have any bearing on criminal law. And so until GPT-3 came along, whenever we had to go through this process, you'd have to go through a long spreadsheet, picking out the keywords that are relevant to the site that you're working with, and kind of just go through this manual filtering process. So I wanted to see whether this is something that GPT-3 could help with. And so I created this in a Google Sheet. Now, in order to make this work in a Google Sheet, you need to be able to write some code in Google AppScript, which is the language of Google Sheets. It's kind of a variation of JavaScript. The problem here is that my coding skills are about 40 years out of date. I do not know how to code in Google AppScript. Thankfully, GPT-3 does. So all I did is I went to GPT-3, I described the code I needed in English, and it then generated the Google AppScript code for me. And with that, I was then able to put these sheets together. And by the way, all these things I'm showing you are all available for you to download and free to use. So all you really need to do is just kind of open up this Google Sheet. You put in your API key from OpenAI. That's kind of like your password. We then just simply upload that keyword data, all of those keywords that we got from Ahrefs, bring them in here, press a button, and immediately GPT-3 then classifies them as either legal or non-legal. And it does so incredibly accurately. If you have a look at this list here, I mean, it's just a small sample, but you can see straight away that, you know, things like alien conspiracy, non-legal, fraud conspiracy sentence, legal. So the level of accuracy was really, really high. And that's just by simply providing it with a prompt to do that. And this same system can be very easily adapted to classify all kinds of keywords or different information for all different types of websites. So that was a job that previously took a lot of time, really dull and boring job to have to do, immediately resolved by GPT-3. So that kind of got me into then looking for other use cases. So this is another one here. I don't know if you're familiar with this website. This is SparkToro, which is a website that allows you to do some audience research. Very good website. I was working with a client that had a website that publishes content for the agricultural farming community in America. and they wanted to kind of write some articles that would be of interest to that community. Now, I don't know very much about the agricultural farming community in America or what they'd be interested in. So what I did is I went to SparkToro and I selected this option here. My audience frequently visits the website, and I put in farms.com, which is a very, very popular blog for agricultural farmers in America. You put that in there, and what it will do is it will show you a list of all the hashtags that audience, the people that visit that website, the hashtags that they most frequently use when they're posting things on social media. I mean, it gives you a whole load of other information as well, but at the moment, I'm just focused on that one. So with that, I was then able to download that list of hashtags and create another Google Sheet. And all you need to do is you go into the settings tab, you put your API key in this cell here, you describe the audience that you want this content to be for, agricultural farmers in the USA, and then you pop over to the other tab, which is the hashtags tab, upload that list of hashtags that we got from SparkToro, pop that in here, and then wait a few seconds, and immediately it then generates content titles directly based on the hashtags that those people are using. So we know they're interested in these topics and targeted towards the audience that we defined in the settings sheet. So immediately you've got a ton of content ideas that can go straight into your content calendar. So that was also something we found really helpful. Another sheet I put together was this one here. This is classifies keywords by their conversion potential. So if you want to if you've got a big list of keywords and you want to categorize these keywords by those that are most likely to lead to a sale or an inquiry, you go to the settings tab, you put your API key in, you describe the business, you describe their product, and then you give 2 or 3 examples of keywords and whether they have strong, medium, or weak conversion potential. So this is what we call few shot training in AI, where you just give it a few examples just so it's got an idea of what you're after. And then you pop over to the keywords tab again, upload your list of keywords, just a few examples here, so paste them in here. And then in a few seconds, it immediately classifies them as either having strong, medium, or weak conversion potential. Again, a job that would have potentially taken hours or days to have to accomplish with long lists of keywords. And then if you are someone that's ever been unfortunate enough to have to write alt tags, if you've ever worked with an e-commerce client and they've got thousands of products on their website, and then you've got to write alt tags for all the product images on the website, you will know how laborious a task that is. So this is another Google Sheet I created that again uses GPT-3 and another API on top, where all you have to do is just upload a list of the URLs of all these images, and you can do this with thousands all at the same time. Just upload the URLs, paste them in here. It then identifies what's in the image and then creates the alt tags for it. And as you can see, these are really accurate alt tags. And if you need to include some brand terms in there, which obviously it wouldn't pick up by looking at the image, then you just put that in that box and it will make sure to include that term within the alt tag. So I recently had to do this for a company with 15,000 products that all needed alt tags. They were going to go and pay someone manually to go and create and write all of these. We had that job done in 15 minutes in this Google Sheets at very little cost. I think the whole cost of doing those 15,000 alt tags, just to give you an idea, was around about £20. This is another application that I put together. I don't know if you've ever heard of Heyro. This is a website called Help a Reporter Out, where they collate together requests from journalists who are looking for sources for stories they're writing. And this is a great opportunity for brands to be featured in the press. Now, the only problem is that when you sign up for Heyro, you get every single day an email with hundreds and hundreds of these journo requests. And each one of these requests has very specific requirements. So they'll say, you know, what kind of source they're looking for, what kind of expertise they're after, what the story is all about, their deadline, all this kind of information. So again, you've got this really laborious task of having to go through all of these requests, trying to figure out whether your company or your spokesperson is suitable to respond to this story and has the necessary expertise. So, sorry, oops, yeah. So I put together a little script, again with a Google Sheet, and essentially what that does is it gets the email. So the email is sent through to the script automatically from Heyro. It then identifies any journo requests that are applicable to that particular organization. If there is one that's suitable, it then emails it to the relevant person, and also then sends them, and then it also sends them a pitch to send to the journalist summarizing their experience and why they would be relevant for that particular story. So again, a job that took a long time, really cut down. And then one other little thing here, this is if you've got a WordPress website, there's a very good chance that you've probably got Gravity Forms installed. It's a plugin that kind of provides a form on there. Well, they've now just created this free add-on, which is an OpenAI plugin, which allows you to create your own apps with no coding required at all, that can do pretty much anything on a WordPress website. So I put together this little app, which is a recipe generator. I actually created this for my wife. She's on a low carb diet. You put in a few ingredients, press the button, wait a few seconds, generates an AI image of the recipe, all the ingredients, preparation instructions, and then shows her the carbohydrate value. Now, obviously that particular use case may not be applicable to you, but just think of all the tools and apps and applications you could make for clients' websites that can drive traffic in to use that free tool, that can do pretty much anything with no coding skills required at all, just simply installing that plugin. Yeah, so that, sorry, I got my slides out of order. So that was the email request that GPT-3 generates for the journalist that I mentioned before. And in terms of where I think this is likely to impact things in the future, particularly in SEO, is I think one area where we're going to see a lot of impact is around technical improvements being made to a website on the edge. So when the page is being served to the client browser, any SEO issues that are on that page can actually be fixed in real time by the AI. If you go and ever use a tool that throws up and tells you all the kinds of technical problems on a website, this is a list from a tool called Sitebulb that does an audit of a website, generates all kinds of different problems you may have. Looking through this list, I can't see any here that couldn't be automatically resolved by an AI today, based on the current technology, which is obviously likely to have quite a big impact on the role of technical SEOs. And I think we're going to start seeing this built into all the big CMS platforms like WordPress and Shopify, things like that. One of the common criticisms of GPT-3 is that it's trained on this kind of corpus of data that had a cutoff date in 2021. And so people say, well, it quite often gives inaccurate results or they're out of date. Well, that has largely been resolved. And I've even now managed to put together a Google Sheet that you can put in any kind of question or information. And if GPT-3 is not sure and doesn't have the current information, it will pull that data from the web and then produce a response. So you can put in things here, like you can ask it about a conference. It will generate an answer and give you information about that conference. You can put in the URL of any web page. It will tell you what's on that web page. You can ask it for information on a company's shares, and it will give you the information from that moment, pricing for different software. So even live current information with it citing sources, accurate information, that's pretty much a solved problem now. And we're starting to see search engines now including generated AI content in the search results. Neva have already shown this. You will have seen in the last few days, Bing have announced and Google have announced that they're going to be bringing AI results into search engines. And this is likely to have a pretty significant impact on how people use search and interact with search. Early days yet to see what the impact will be, but I would be surprised if it didn't create a fundamental shift in the world of SEO and how people use search engines. So yeah, I mentioned this. And kind of going forward from that, I think, this whole notion of Google search results being a series of 10 blue links on the page, I think it's only really SEOs that want 10 blue links. I'm not sure that that search users really want or need 10 blue links. They want answers to their questions. And I think it's, going to be a very short time before we see Google actually generating the responses that people are looking for, rather than showing 10 blue links to different websites. If people want to know what's the best laptop, then Google are just going to tell them what the best laptops are and pull that information from the web. At the moment, from the demos that Google have produced, they're not even linking out to websites or citing sources in these responses. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And I do kind of wonder, with all the effort that Google goes to in terms of making sure that the results they give to people are high quality. They kind of have this term EAT, expertise, authority, and trust, and they've now added experience to that. It does kind of make me wonder whether a lot of that effort that Google's going through is actually for the purpose of training a machine learning model to get to the point where they can produce this high quality content themselves with AI. On social media, if you've got a social media company, their main focus is about getting engagement, making content go viral. If they can produce AI generated content that they know has a very good chance of going viral, why would they not do so? Why rely only on users? And already in pay-per-click advertising, we're seeing more and more accounts switching over to Performance Max, where you've got Google's AI managing the entire campaign. And from my experience of looking at clients and how this is working for them, these campaigns often perform better than human managed campaigns. So in PPC, we're already seeing that shift. And then you've got kind of Google's quality rater guidelines, where they're really kind of working through and trying to figure out what makes for high quality. And again, there is the possibility that this could just all be used to be training a machine learning model. So yeah, it's very hard to predict how this is going to impact the future and how this is going to impact jobs going forward. But there is no doubt in my mind at all that we are entering a period of seismic change. And, what I've been doing with my work over the last year is really just kind of putting stuff out there to try and encourage everyone and you to play around with this technology, get familiar with it, understand how it works, what it can and can't do. And the more informed you are, I think the better position you're going to be in going forward. I hope this has been of some interest to you. I'll pass you back to Will.
Wow. Thanks, Danny. That was really interesting. And just to reiterate to everyone, all those scripts in Google Sheets that Danny was running to do, like you say, very laborious work, you can get them. They're totally free. Danny's created them and gifted them to us. They're all in the cheat sheet, which is in the handout section. So there's a cheat sheet called gptextras.pdf, and you can grab them there. And I did have a play with them myself actually beforehand, and they're fantastic. They're really good. Okay, great. Right. Well, Clark and Danny, we have a lot of questions for you. I don't know if you brought a little camp bed with you for this one.
Got all the time in the world.
Right. So we might go past what is 13 minutes away, the hour. It's currently nearly 4 o'clock in this part of the world. Now, if we go over, just rest assured, if anyone watching has to leave, the recording will obviously include however long we go on for. It won't try and keep you too long, guys, but there's definitely a good few questions to get through. So yeah, if you've got to leave, you'll get it in the recording. Right, let's go. So there's been quite a lot of questions about accuracy and about incorrect answers and what have you. So what's the current state of play? I mean, you did mention it a bit, Danny. There's a backup where it's just grabbing live information from the internet. There's also a feedback functionality, isn't there, currently? So how, and someone in the question said they had it produce some code the other day and the code was completely wrong. So what is the hit rate in your experience in terms of accuracy currently, and at what point do you think it will become almost 100%?
Yeah, so it has been a much bigger issue up until quite recently, because you had this problem where GPT-3 had this kind of corpus of training data, which, you know, gathered from the web, from all these different sources. And so it was generating responses based on that information. The thing is, once you start playing around with it, you're able to see that GPT-3, even though it does sometimes give inaccurate information, it knows when it's giving inaccurate information.
Yeah.
It does have an understanding of where it's not certain about something. And so the latest developments, what we're now seeing is where it's coming back with a response where it isn't quite certain, or it realizes that that information may not be current. It's then pulling that information from the web and then generating a response based on that live information from the web. So I think that whole issue around accuracy, I mean, you know, will it ever be 100% perfect? I don't know. But then what humans are 100% perfect in
totally, and that's, you know, it's never a copy and paste job. I mean, that we're here to interpret what it spits out.
So you know, I think, you know, there always may be some accuracy issue to some degree, but I think we're going to see in a very short space of time that almost becoming a non-issue.
Yeah. Beth asks a good question again that a lot of people have asked some version of. How does copyright work? How confident are we that the information isn't in some way owned by someone and it's just been reworded a bit by GPT-3?
Yeah, that's an intriguing one. Yeah, because I saw, I think it was Ade mentioned as well, you know, the recent win for Hermes, a legal victory over a digital artist who'd used one of their products to create an NFT that then generated a large income. So there is that question of whether, you know, the legal industry is able to keep pace with this level of change that's going around. There are actually quite a few lawsuits going in against OpenAI at the minute, and it escapes me at the moment. I think it might be Stable Diffusion. There is now an opt-out option for artists, so you can say, I do not permit for my artworks to be used within your algorithms. So there might be a bit more of that sense of control in future, opting out of being part of the training corpus in the first place. But that doesn't seem all that useful in the long term, because if everybody did that, there'd be nothing left for them to use. Yeah. So there were questions as well I saw about, well, could you just create a product using this and start selling it? And yes, I mean, that is what a lot of these people are already doing, because there is no sense of any new legal framework in place. There's nothing new to, I mean, that's really what OpenAI is trying to ask people to do. Stable Diffusion is saying, yep, make a copy of our code and go and amend it to whatever you want to do. Yeah. So there isn't really a sense at the moment that these things are, say, a big danger. If you wanted to make a service and start selling it, I think that's always going to be fine. The other one is more about the underlying data ownership or the product ownership. If you have, say, submitted artworks, or it's taken your style of writing, and someone then says, write me a novel in the style of whoever, and then they go and publish the novel and they make £1 million off it because it's actually done better than the original one. That's another case. So I think we can separate it out. There are tools using the APIs, using the frameworks. Those are pretty much what are already making tens of millions of dollars a month for a lot of companies. And then there's the other copyright issue around IP, essentially, or the intellectual property you would have as a content creator. That's the murkier bit. And there are already some pretty big cases going into the courts as we stand. So I don't know what will happen with those, but it looks like OpenAI might actually have to pay out on some of those. And Stable Diffusion is allowing people to opt out of its algorithms.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, just as a sort of similar question, and I saw Saoirse ask about AI produced content of some sort, generative content, how it will perform in SEO. I suppose this one for you, Danny, that because I worry about this. I'm concerned about using any prose or text generated by Chat GPT, because I worry that there's going to be a penalty from Google in some way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the beginning of my slides, I've not personally found this technology to be quite good enough yet for producing long form content. That for me is not its core strength. In terms of SEO, it's been a real mixed bag from Google, because on the one hand, they're saying don't produce whole articles generated by AI. On the other hand, they're saying we have no problem with people producing content produced with AI. We don't care how it's produced. All we care about is the quality of the content. And I think
that's their purest answer, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's probably actually in the middle of all of that, there's kind of the best response, which is absolutely feel free, and I do use this as a tool, as a first draft tool, and to generate kind of an outline and a structure for content, really, really useful for doing that kind of thing. But then it absolutely needs a human touch to then go over that, refine it, improve it, make sure it's completely accurate in all these areas. But as a writing tool, it's absolutely fine. Just to leave it churning out automatically thousands of pages, I would not advise doing that.
Yeah, because I would add that as well. That I completely agree with that, and I've written a bit about that because it gets a bit murky sometimes. Because if I use it sometimes, I'll write a whole article and then I'll say, actually, could there be a different structure to this? And ChatGPT will say you could add these headings, and that might be helpful. And the authorship then is a little bit murkier. It's getting involved, and I can even say rephrase these 3 sentences, and it'll do it, and it'll do it pretty well. I might just use those sentences. So what? It's 70% my work, 30% ChatGPT. But the big part of this, of course, is we don't think that often about the audience. So if you could churn out this content and Google wouldn't penalize you, well, the end reader will. They're going to look at it and know that it's not good enough. If you wouldn't read this yourself, you shouldn't be pumping it out there for supposedly customers to read at the end of it. And that's the bit where I think Google is right not to get too weighed down in, is it AI, is it human, whatever. A lot of the human content out there is pretty awful. The AI can do that.
Yeah, Google's just grading quality, and it's observing how people interact with content, how much they click on it, how long they dwell on content, and if it's useful, it wins, and if it's not, it doesn't.
Yeah. So if you think if ChatGPT was creating content that you thought, oh, this is fantastic, but I better edit it a bit just so I don't get penalized by Google, that's not really the way to go about it. If you really think, it's almost like that classic sort of smell test. If it gets to the stage where it's good enough, and that'll be a while away, I don't see how it would be able to do that straight away, then fine. You could pump out that content. If you're not penalized by Google, you'll be penalized by your readers, and then Google will penalize you after, because it'll see that the people didn't like it.
Exactly, yeah. And I thought it was a really good point you made, Danny, about, I think that we're so distracted by this shiny ball of like, wow, a really easy way to produce loads of content. That's what this must be for. And actually, you're right. It's better at slightly more technical and data-led things like classifying data, helping, as you say, Clark, I use it a lot to write code, even just basic stuff like, can you write me a form that does something on a website, or just little bits that you can't be bothered writing yourself. And that does seem to be what it's currently really most useful.
The only thing I would say to that, Will, is that, I've been involved in tech now for 45 years, and I've gone through every stage of tech, from the first ever personal computers, the internet, the mobile phone. I have never seen anything move as quickly as this. I am giving a lot of talks and presentations at the moment, and people are asking me to submit my slide deck like a week or two before the event. It's completely pointless because it's out of date. I can guarantee it's going to be out of date. This is changing by the day. And so when Clark says it may be a little while before we're going to get this tech producing high quality content, when he says a little while, you might mean a month.
Tuesday.
I know, because I noticed, Danny, I saw we've had iterations of our slides, and saw the first version of yours 2 weeks ago, and you had mocked up, the Google homepage 2027 best laptops. It could be the end of the week.
Yeah. A week later, and that's the reality.
Absolutely. Does this pull the rug from under things like Jasper and Copy.ai?
It's interesting with that, because we see Microsoft saying that they're going to release tools, and Google as well, to allow developers to get a bit more hands-on with the models and train them to their own purposes. And that might allow those companies then to create that moat that we like to talk about. So at the minute, if you really wanted to create a copy of copy.ai, you'd be able to do it. And that's what venture capital money is going into at the minute. So startups are incentivized to try and create something similar. Problem is, in 6 months' time, 6 weeks, even 6 days at the minute, the rug could be pulled from under them. What they'll be looking at is, are we going to be able to adapt this so that it becomes something unique to us, even that they could register as their own IP, and then it becomes the Jasper framework built on top of OpenAI, built on top of Google's Lambda. That'll be more interesting for them. So there were, I should say, a few crumbs from the table yesterday from Microsoft in saying they will open this up to developers and you'll be able to train this for yourself. Now, I still think other companies, individual companies, could just train their own version that would be adapted to their very own purposes. It's going to be built into Microsoft Azure. So why wouldn't you, if you're even a medium-sized company, and I'm no great programmer or coder. Danny was talking about how you can get ChatGPT or GPT-3 to write the queries for you. I've been doing that myself for a lot of programs. It doesn't seem that the barrier to entry is going to be so high that companies couldn't just generate their own versions of these tools as well. So there's a real rush. I think there are a lot of companies that are very highly valued at the minute because they're in the right place at the right time that will disappear in 6 months. They just won't be valid anymore. They need to build that we like to call it a moat in our business school talk.
By the way, Vicky, I saw in the chat, and I think other people have asked this, Danny, do you have a step-by-step guide how to do all this? And yes, he does. It's SEOtraininglondon.org. The link is in the download, in the PDF download in the sheet.
So Emma put a link directly just to my blog. I put a link in the chat that goes directly to the page with all the sheets on it and the scripts on it. So it's just a direct link.
And you don't have to be able to write code. I know this is sounding quite technical, but you don't have to be able to do any of that. You can do all of what Danny did without touching a piece of code.
I can't write code.
Right, okay.
There's the proof.
Very good, very good. Okay, so what about the skills around this stuff? A lot of people are asking about prompts. Okay, do you think that it's on every marketer, on every marketer now to learn how to prompt? Is that a new skill we all need to get around?
I think it's quite likely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have to say that's one of the areas that I find really enjoyable about using this technology. That process of constructing a prompt is a kind of a mix of logic and creativity. I think kind of Clark touched on that. It's an art and a science. And just noticing how the results you get can vary so much depending on very careful selection of words that you put into these prompts. Is a really, I find, a very creative process. I've really enjoyed that. And it's something you get better and better at over time. And I think, yes, it is going to very likely be a skill that many people will start having to get to grips with. And there'll be people that are good at that and people that are less good at that.
Yeah.
And I think a way just to get into it, and Danny touched on this as well, is understanding those fundamental mechanics that are going on here. What is it that the tool is doing in the background, and how could you adapt that to your own means? So I put together this little chatbot yesterday just to demonstrate what this can do for someone. And I put it on just a staging website I have for something I'm going to put out soon. And within every page, it's making calls to the OpenAI API, and it encourages you to ask questions. And all I've done within the API call is append some different things. So the person could come in and say, oh, how do I explain broad match versus exact match? But I've just put a little bit at the end of it that says, explain this using an analogy. You are a seasoned digital marketing expert explaining this to a novice. So the person doesn't see that. They're just saying, what's keyword research? But the prompt that's going is saying, make sure you use an analogy, keep it simple, and just understanding those little building blocks. That doesn't take a huge amount of time, but it puts you way ahead because it looks like magic when people go to use it. And that's what this has put into our hands. But you do just need to get a little bit hands-on with some of that. There are some good resources you can look at that'll explain to you how it all works. Build your first thing, and I'm sure Danny would agree with this, getting hands-on, realizing what's possible for yourself will just open lots more avenues to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? So thinking about that chatbot on your website, Clark, are there any risks? I mean, a few people have asked about that. Lisa asked about risks, for certain industries. You would be kind of hesitant about letting that kind of technology loose on your visitors, perhaps, in more regulated industries. Do you think there are any risks? Or do you notice any kind of like iffy results, iffy kind of responses?
Oh yeah, like the main thing that I want to do before, because it's really just as a little help assistant I want to have within the website, is figure out the best ways to train it on my own examples and ways of thinking, and put restrictions on it so there are things that it won't talk about, because the use case that I wanted to do is pretty clear, trying to teach people about digital marketing here. So you could at the minute ask it about, did the moon landings happen or whatever, and it would chat to you about that using an analogy as if it's a digital marketing expert. That's not really what I wanted to do. But you can confine those things quite easily, and there are a lot more capabilities coming to us that will allow us to train it on our own corpus of materials. So I have loads of digital marketing examples, loads of ways of explaining things and everything. So just teach it, these are the kinds of things to do. It'll create something new but similar, and it won't talk about those other things, because like people are mentioning, if I were running, say, a legal website or something really important like that, not just my own little chatbot for digital marketing, I would want to be very, very, very careful with that first, and I would want it to do a lot of testing before it went out in the wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Danny, you gave the example. I mean, the gravity forms thing, that's great. That's not something I've played around with. I'm definitely, that's the first thing I'm doing when we hang up today. And someone actually said that they didn't see that in the slides. I don't know, but just recap us a little bit on that, and let's talk about a couple of other associated use cases. So this specific to WordPress websites and the gravity forms plugin. Yeah, just tell us a bit more about what's going on there.
Yeah, well, so, so many people have a WordPress website. And if you do have a WordPress website, there's a very good chance you've got a Gravity Forms plugin, because it's one of the most popular forms plugins for WordPress.
Yeah.
A little while ago, they released an add-on for Gravity Forms, which allows you to make an OpenAI or a GPT-3 request, API request from the form. But they've really kind of made it so easy for people, because you don't really need to know anything about the technicalities behind it. All it does is takes a field from the form, so you can design any form you want. So in my form, in the example I showed in the deck before, it was a field with only a form with only one field on it, which was my wife enters the ingredients that we've got in the fridge. That then gets submitted over to GPT-3 in an API call, together with a prompt that says to generate a low carb recipe with the following ingredients. And then you take the value of that field that she enters, and it sends it over, and then sends a response. And then when the response comes back, you can then choose what you want to do with that. You can then have it displayed underneath the form on a different page, used in a post or another page. You can send it wherever you want. But it's really, really easy to use. And that add-on, the OpenAI add-on, is completely free if you've already got Gravity Forms.
And it's the simplicity. I mean, that's why ChatGPT's blown up. I mean, GPT-3 and its predecessors have been around for a long time. It's when the interface becomes that just anyone can use it and it's completely no code. That's the magic of this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. But, like Clark was mentioning before, he's trying to create this chatbot, this digital marketing expert chatbot. You could have done that with that Gravity form and just had a form as the chatbot. You would never have had to have used any code at all to create that. I don't know whether you did need any code, but you could have done that just using a Gravity form, get the response back. They ask a question. That would be one application. But just think of all the different tools and fun apps that you could build on a website that would then drive traffic into that website. So many applications. It's only limited by your imagination.
It really is. And it doesn't stop at automated husbandry, although I like your style, and I'm definitely going to copy some of the ideas behind that.
Brownie points are worth a lot, Will,
They really are. They are priceless. You're very right. Okay, a couple more questions before I let you go. Mohammed asks, very good question. It's broad, but let's try and get specific about it. He says, how could ChatGPT and GPT-3 in general, I suppose, impact online advertising. You know, I suppose to just paraphrase that a little bit, if everyone's using kind of the same, because they are, as soon as that looks good, everybody's going to be using the same technologies to produce ad copy, and everything will be maximally optimized. Will it? I don't know. Where's that going to go, do you think?
Well, one of the big bits, this actually reminds me, even though what's happening is a bit different, the underlying pattern is similar to when Google moved to these PMax campaigns, actually, or when it moved to universal app campaigns a few years ago. And we were asking the same questions. So we're all using the exact same technology in the middle bit. What's going to be the difference? Well, the difference is going to be things like your brand. It's going to be the inputs that you put into the machine to allow it to do something. It's never going to be completely automated. It isn't going to just market on behalf of every brand as one simple machine. It's going to need inputs. It's going to have to be trained on things. It's going to be using, it's a language model, large language model. It's going to go out there and see what's written about you and adapt itself to that, as well as what you're feeding into it. So just like it happened with universal app campaigns and then PMax campaigns, a lot of people, and thereby by extension companies, got a bit lazy because they thought, well, the machine's doing it all. It's all automated. We just need to hit the big button and hope for the best. But the ones who got the best results really started thinking about the creative assets that they were putting into the machine at the start, and they found that the outputs were much more effective. So again, we need to break it down a bit and see, where are we having our own input? There will be a lot of parts there, and that's where we have leverage over the results. So the way that it affects online advertising could be the fundamental mechanics of it from the customer's point of view, in that they can interact more directly, they can have an adaptive experience, they can converse a bit more, there'll be new content fed back to them. That means that the monetization model is different. So if you're Google search, you haven't just got static search queries that you can serve up and sell to advertisers all the time. That's going to change as well. The way that brands go about it is going to be different. So it really reorders absolutely everything that we're thinking about here.
It makes today's setup sound quite quaint the way you describe it, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think it will become much more dynamic. It will require new ways of creating and monetizing value. And that's why Google has been reluctant to get involved in this. It has a pretty amazing profit-making machine at its disposal, and it does not want to give it up.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I found myself feeling a little bit reluctant to make any kind of predictions around what's going to happen in the future around this technology, because it's changing too fast, really, and I'd make myself look like a fool. The one thing I would say is I don't think anyone gets into digital marketing or SEO because they don't like change. If you did, you made a big mistake.
Yeah, wrong game.
You're in the wrong industry if you don't like change. And as someone that likes change and embraces it and loves the fact that there's just always something new to learn that you've got to stay on top of, I'm really enjoying the ride. And that's what I would recommend to people is, sit tight, hold on and enjoy the ride and learn as much as you can and be prepared to change everything about the way you do stuff on a day-to-day basis. Don't get too stuck in doing things the way you've always done them, because that's very likely to change. So that's what I would say to people in the industry.
Well, as a closing question, I suppose, just yeah, you're right. You're right to be cautious about getting your crystal ball out. But as a closing question, where's the best place for people to just generally keep up to speed on this stuff, do you think?
For me, it's been Twitter. It's been my main source of learning, following the right kind of people on Twitter. So if you're not sure who to follow, go and have a look at who I'm following on Twitter. And anyone I've followed within the last year is going to be something to do with AI. But there is also an excellent newsletter that goes out called Ben's Bites, produced by a guy called Ben Tossell. And it's a daily newsletter. So, hats off to him for putting something out every day. But it's just a really easy read. It's just kind of links to all the cool stuff and latest stuff that's happening on a day-to-day basis in AI. So check out Ben's Bites and just sign up for his free newsletter. It's a great way to keep abreast of what's going on.
Yeah, I have a few free newsletters. I follow as well. Even just simple things like getting TLDR in every morning at 11 a.m. will give me the top 5 things that have happened in the last day. That's a good one to start with. I definitely curate who you're following on social networks. Twitter's definitely the best one for that. Even in its current guise with things breaking every day, it's still where the interesting people are sharing interesting thoughts. And I just have basic Google alerts set up for things as well. Just try and read what news is coming in. I'm going to get that then integrated with GPT-3. It's going to tell me a little bit more about those stories and summarize them for me, and trying to build that into a workflow. But yeah, just think about those ways that you can get the news as it happens, because there's so much happens every day. If you try and catch up at the end of the week, what happened on Monday won't even be relevant anymore. I keep getting webinars pushed back because people are saying, have you seen what just happened this morning? That's going to change. Let's think about it. And then by the next day, then, oh God, Microsoft's got a new event coming. And it's one to keep up with on a daily basis.
Good. Well, it absolutely is. And that is absolutely the exciting thing about it. It's moving so fast. And that puts us all in the same boat where it's a level playing field, right? No one's got any information you don't have. It's new every morning. So, well, look, I've been Will Francis here on behalf of the Digital Marketing Institute. And thanks to Danny Richmond and Clark Boyd, you guys have brought some fantastic information. And there's plenty for us to be getting on with now after downloading the